Hi everyone, Mrs. Davis here, and I am going to talk to you about primary and secondary succession. So it's two different types of succession. And succession might not be a word that you've heard in regard to ecology before, but I guarantee it's something that you have observed in your environment. So let's take another look at it. So the big ideas that we're going to cover in this lecture would be what effects or natural disturbances can cause ecosystems to require succession, so what requires them to have to move back to their natural state. There has to be some kind of disturbance in the natural ecosystem. What is primary succession and what is secondary succession? We'll cover that as well. So first, brainstorm a few ways that an ecosystem could be disturbed. And I would recommend pausing at this point because I'm going to continue the recording to save time. So maybe some things that you brainstormed, completed in your Pear Deck or completed in your notes would be fires, natural disasters, lava flows, some type of construction or clearing of the land or farming. Those would all be considered disturbances in an ecosystem. So let's go on a field trip. We're going to take a couple looks at a natural forest in Southern California to see what is changing. So here we have a picture where we see lots of greenery throughout the ecosystem, some tall trees, and lots of green bushes, some exposed rock outcrops. In this image, you'll notice there's definitely a difference in the sky. Looks like smoke. The landscape has been pretty much cleared. We have these burnt plants, not green plants anymore. And so this is really what it would look like after a brush fire came through and cleared the area. So now we have to restart in order to move back to what we had before. And that's where succession plays in. Succession is working to get back what we lost. So here I've posted a video on wildfires and some of the misconceptions with wildfires. This video is good at showing what some of the positive effects that a wildfire can have on a community, but it's also important to note that not all wildfires are necessary or good to an ecosystem, especially some of the extreme ones that we're seeing out in California or Oregon where we don't usually see wildfires. So this is largely due to climate change and human intervention. All right, so thinking about succession and where you've seen it in your own life, Halloween's right around the corner. You may be thinking about haunted houses. And what happens basically when a property is abandoned and it's no longer maintained is that nature is going to rebuild itself. So succession states that nature is always going to seek to return to its natural equilibrium or its natural state. So it's not too difficult to predict that over the next 100 years or so we would see possibly no building left and lots of plants and trees in the place of this structure. There would still be a foundation, but as more time passed by, that foundation would slowly be filled in, and eventually you wouldn't see a structure anymore. So fires can cause disturbances. They can destroy the ability of natural resources to be maintained. They can be caused by humans, and they sometimes have positive effects. And succession is basically going to happen after some type of disturbance. So the house was built on that property, that's a disturbance. There was a fire in the ecosystem, that's a disturbance. It's something that has taken us away from the natural ecosystem. Okay, so some examples of disturbances include, on the natural side, fires, volcanic eruptions, floods, storms, and droughts. These are all going to be effects or disturbances on the ecosystem. So Some human-caused disturbances could be deforestation, so loss of forests to either slash and burn techniques for fertilizing the soil and agriculture, or possibly construction, which would, of course, impede the natural system, or any kind of infrastructure, home building, road construction. And I would also say just normal farming is a form of disturbance for as far as the natural ecosystem goes. If a farm field would be abandoned, then over time you wouldn't just have grass or an empty field, you would have tall trees and it would return to forest. Okay, so disturbances cause communities to change. This is called ecological succession. So that is our main topic. Communities are changing. They want to move back to their natural state. There are two types of succession, primary and secondary. Primary succession occurs in communities where the area is completely lifeless, so there's not even soil after this type of disturbance. So examples could be a lava flow taking over an area, or even new islands created by erupting lava or erupting volcanoes, which would mean that you're left with a barren surface that's just rock. And from that state, you slowly build soils, you slowly build moss, and eventually you'll get to other life and plant forms. When a glacier recedes or melts, it's also going to leave behind just the bare rock. So for the ecosystem to reform there, it would have to start by forming some preliminary soils. Okay, so here is a look at what the stages of primary succession look like. You can notice that we start with bare rock, and then rock slowly gets covered in these moss-like plants called lichen. You've probably seen them around your house, or maybe in a park. They're just kind of these green leaf, mossy looking structures that stick to rocks. And what they do is they release a weak acid, and this acid over time breaks the rock down to form an early soil. Once we have some early soil, then we can have some small annual plants, which leads to perennial herbs and grasses. Then those grasses lead to shrubs and shade intolerant trees. So trees that need a lot of sunlight, which is fine because this would be a young growth area. And then eventually you get to a mature growth where you have shade tolerant trees, so trees that can grow even if they're shaded by other trees in a thick forest. So if nothing happens, then we are going to go from bare rock to our natural state, which would be forest. And over time the soils will build up and you'll be able to support that ecosystem. That's primary succession. You're starting with bare rock. So the stages are just reiterated here. And if you'd like to pause at this point to fill them in your notes, please go ahead, but it's exactly what I have explained in the last image. And I'm running out of time, so answer these questions on your own. Secondary succession is a little bit different than primary because we are left with something. So we're left with leaves, soil, maybe even some small plants are left behind, so you're not quite starting from zero. So this could be after a wildfire, but while the large plants are removed, you're still left with some soil, maybe some grasses, and over time you can build that up and return back to what you had at the beginning. Stages of secondary succession. Pause and make sure you fill in your notes. Okay, so a couple questions, and we will review the answers as a class. And that will be in the next presentation. So please reach out if you have any questions, complete the notes, and then go to the Edpuzzle for succession.